Hi there, fellow primates. I'm Ronald and welcome to my channel. Now, I have more than 10,000 entries in my EndNote library. How about that? How many have you got? Now, if you don't know what EndNote is, it's a piece of reference management software, and scientists use it to more easily compile the bibliographies of their papers and books. So I suppose with 10,000 pieces of literature consumed, and I've published about 100, published about 50 peer-reviewed papers, written 2 books, one of which is still in press, and written 50 or so assorted essays and reviews. That makes my fuel economy 1 in 100, one publication produced on a diet of 100 publications. I don't know if that's good or not, but what I have learned is that in the years of reading the scientific literature, which I've been doing now for a quarter century or so, my favorite place to do that is on trains. There's no greater way to cut through the boredom and the tedium of commuting than by reading scientific literature on a train. Time goes really quickly. Of course, now with the lockdown, that's not so common anymore. Another place where I read, but I do actually very little reading, perhaps ironically, is my office. I don't know if I'm unique, but I feel a bit naughty if I read literature in my scientific literature in my office. Unless it is directly related to the research I'm doing, I don't read in the office. I do a lot of reading on the hoof as well. One place where I've read a lot of papers in the last 12 years is in the 300 meters or so between the Natural History Museum and the local Waitrose where I grab my lunch. But of course, a place where a lot of reading gets done, and that's undoubtedly not just me, is the toilet, both at work and in the last almost 2 years here. In fact, I've read entire books on the toilet. This book, written by my friends Dave and Malte, took me about 18 bowel movements. So this is a 430-page book, a typical 18-seater. But that's just a joke. You may want to keep this in mind if you ever come to me to borrow some literature, book or paper. But that's just joking. What I've learned in all my years of reading the literature and contributing to it is a thing or two about how to make your readers happy, or at least how to prevent them getting very annoyed with you. So scientific papers are a weird type of literature because generally they're written for peers, for professional scientists, rather than the general public. And writing a scientific paper means that you work within an extremely straitjacketed structure. You have a very precise word limit, and you need to put your paper in this straitjacketed structure of an introduction and materials and methods and results and discussion and conclusion. So you have almost no space for being creative with narrative structure. And if you want to make any story compelling, you need to have a good narrative flow. But scientific papers are simply not structured that way. But even within the constraints of the structure of scientific papers, there are enough degrees of freedom that you can start losing the love of your readers. Now, here in this video, I want to give you a few rules or tips on how to keep your readers happy and how to improve your scientific writing. So the first rule of Ronald for scientific writing is use a fucking dictionary. Why? Well, sometimes you don't know the meaning of words. Even though they look very familiar, you may misspell the words, and then you can create really embarrassing little errors. I use dictionaries all the time. In fact, I've read this dictionary to pieces, but I've got on speed dial the online free version of Merriam-Webster, so I consult it a lot, and not just because I'm not a native English speaker, but also to look up words that you sort of think you might know the meaning of, but you don't really. So for instance, if you look at the words discrete, E-E-T, and discrete, E-T-E, very different meaning, but you can confuse them a lot, and if I do a little search in my PDF collection, people do. So my own PhD supervisor wrote this cute little sentence now a long time ago. It has been taken for granted that the higher malacostracans, which is a group of crustaceans, could be classified as discrete superorders. It's like, oh wow, are they different from the other superorders of crustaceans? Are those immodest? Are they pretentious? No, what he meant is discrete with ETE, which means separate from other entities. So, that's just a silly, not a serious error, but it makes you chuckle and you go, yeah, that's not very smart, is it now, Fred? Another one, and that is probably my greatest bugbear, or at least it is the thing that I noticed all the time in the literature that people get wrong. Principle, P-A-L, and principle, P-L-E. Very different meanings, but you see them confused all the time. So you have people talking that in principle, it should be not P-A-L, but P-L-E, or the principal cause of something, that should not be P-L-E, that should be P-A-L. A couple of weeks ago, a few colleagues and myself contributed to a BBC4 radio program, The Strange Cases of Rutherford and Fry. It was about venom. And I was credited there as a principal P-L-E researcher in the museum. I don't research principles, I research venoms. I'm a principal P-A-L researcher. Now, getting these things right doesn't make you smart, but it makes you perhaps look a little bit less stupid. However, of course, if you read a dictionary, you can also appear better or more smart by essentially diversifying your vocabulary. And I've always been a big fan of doing that. I like to use big words because language is diverse, and it just makes it taste nicer if you sometimes use words that are a bit rarer. So when I was writing the book that is now in press on the history of evolutionary storytelling, my long-suffering wife Sarah read the entire manuscript to find all the rough edges in my prose. And she stumbled over this sentence. Goethe's intuitive approach to the study of unity of type was perfectly propedeutic to more explicit scientific reasoning, both historically and mentally. And she marginally put a margin note in it that said WW. And I found that note WW sprinkled throughout all the hundreds of pages of manuscript. So I asked Sarah, what is that? She said, well, it's a wanker word, Ronald. It's a wanker word. What the hell is propedeutic? And how do you pronounce it anyway? So, well, it's a specific word actually designed for academics. And it means, you know, doing a preliminary preparatory study of an area before you fully dive in. And so it was completely appropriate here. Yeah, I listened to her, and I've now replaced it with a precursor to, but there's enough wanker words left in the manuscript, I'm sure. So that's another way of using a dictionary. Diversify your vocabulary. Variation is the spice of life, and that's true for reading stuff as well. My second rule, don't confuse the singular and the plural. That's especially common for non-native speakers. If you want to have a mnemonic, your data either is or your data are. I think the latter is correct because data is plural. Whatever you do, at least stick with it. Don't mix the two up. Stay consistent. Don't give your reader this sense that there is little speed bumps in the prose and you go, whoa, what was that? Third rule, don't capitalize common versions of scientific names, vernacularized scientific names. So a scientific name of a group of creatures like Diptera, the flies, or Mollusca, the mollusks, they are written with a capital D and a capital M. But if you talk about the anglicized versions, a dipteran or a molluscan stew, then you write them with lowercase letters. And that is an extremely common mistake. I think that mostly non-taxonomists make and beginning writers in biology. Fourth, be concise. And I had to learn that the hard way as well. I like words and I like overstuffing my sentences. I like to cram it full and put a lot of commas in and make them swell. But sometimes, well, not sometimes. I've learned through years of writing and reading that less is often more. So trim the fat. So if you take a sentence like this, the objective of the present study is to further assess, which I took from a paper. Just say, here we assess. Or if you want to connect it more to what came before, here we further assess or address. Trim your fat. Your readers will be grateful for it. Now, this is a sentence that I found in a manuscript I was reviewing yesterday. The taxonomy and phylogeny of the family has presented several confusing taxonomic and phylogenetic problems. Oh, really? Well, how surprising. I think I can see a few words that can be removed here. So trim the fat. You make everybody happy, and it will make your papers more easy to fit in the word limits that most journals set. 5. Use proper diction, and that is especially important for non-native speakers like myself. If you look, and this is one that I have noticed both in speaking and reading in scientific papers, a very strange construction. For instance, a topic is controversially discussed or discussed controversially. And when I look at my literature collection, 99% of the people who make this mistake, who use this weird crooked construction, are my German friends. But what does it mean? I don't know what it means. A topic can be controversial, and the topic can be discussed. But what does it mean to be controversially discussed? And the only way I can make sense of that is that the topic you want to discuss is taboo. For instance, you think that you live in an autocracy, your dear leader looks like he might need a bit more time on the cross trainer, and you are on public transport and you tell your mate this. Well, then you may be controversially discussing something that you shouldn't. Most of us luckily don't live in autocracies and we can discuss topics uncontroversially. So don't use this weird construction. Number 6, use jargon judiciously. There are only 2 reasons to use jargon. 1, to increase precision, to talk with as few words as possible about a specific topic. 2, it is to be concise. So usually when you have a technical term, the definition is much longer, is a collection of words or even sentences. So use it for precision and conciseness. But sometimes these 2 aren't needed because you have perfectly good normal words, and I've learned this the hard way as well, that you should use. Why? Because then you make your writing accessible to more readers. So if you, for instance, look at this paper, published a few years back by Sidney Tam, one of the world's leaders on comb jellies, which is the vernacular word for ctenophora. And these are creatures that look a bit like a jellyfish. They are gelatinous plankton. And the paper was titled Defecation by the ctenophore Mnemiopsis lidii occurs with an ultradian rhythm through a single transient anal pore. Well, that's a pretty long sentence. How about this one, which conveys the same information? Sea walnuts use transient anus to poop several times a day. You lose jargon. I'd never heard of the word ultradian rhythm. That simply means a cycle that is repeated a few times in a 24-hour period. Several times a day, these creatures poop through their anus. That's a word he uses as well. Some people use anal pore, but there's more words. Trim the fat. Don't alienate potential readers. And sometimes people use words, and that is very common in science, that aren't really even words. They are abbreviations, and if you know what they mean, well, you're part of the in-group. But it can be really annoying if you're not part of the in-group, but you were still interested in the topic, like this one. Embryonic development in the primitive bilaterian Neochildia fusca. Normal morphogenesis in isolation of POU genes BRN-1 and BRN-3. What the fuck does that mean? I don't know what this means. How about put it in more normal English? Development of the acial Neochildia fusca and isolation of genes involved in neural development. See, much more clear what it means, because I don't know what these genes do. I don't have that specialist knowledge. It also illustrates another thing. My 7th rule: don't over-season your prose. You can see that these authors used the phrase primitive bilaterian. This is a bilaterian worm that they think may, reflect in a sort of vague silhouette what the ancestor of bilaterians looked like. So they use the word primitive as a sort of narrative condiment, like evolutionary MSG that people sprinkle on their creatures to give them an ancestral flavor. And it is extremely common. In my book that will be coming out hopefully later this spring, very early summer, I discuss a language use like this, which is designed to put you in the mood to believe that the creatures that people study are very special, certainly more special than the creatures your neighbor studies. Don't believe it. It is just hype. Use precise language. Give readers a chance to savor your organism and decide for themselves what their evolutionary significance, if any, is. 8th rule of Ronald: use concrete words. We are a visual species, and although academics like to boast that they can think abstractly and very conceptually, which I love as well, if you want to make your stuff easily understandable, use concrete words, words that visualize stuff. For instance, look at this title. Just need to visualize it on my side screen. Spinning gland transcriptomics from 2 main clades of spiders, order Arenii, insights on their molecular, anatomical and behavioral evolution. I understand what it means, but it is also very vague. What does it mean? Molecular, anatomical, behavioral evolution of what? Of what things are they talking? So if you translate this into normal English, you can make it Transcriptomic analyses illuminate the evolution of spider silk proteins, web use, and spinning gland anatomy. Oh, well, that's very concrete. I'm interested in these topics. I might read more than the title. And here, there you go. You have gained a new reader. And also, if you use a term like Arenii, an expert already knows that spiders are in the order Arenii, and a non-expert doesn't need to know it. It doesn't add anything. It is just jargon fluff. Now, finally, one of the things within the constrained structure of evolutionary papers, where one of the areas where scientists can actually have a bit of fun is in their titles. And one of the commonest stylistic tricks they do is to use alliteration. But if you don't arse it up. For instance, look at the title of this paper. A pseudoscorpion's promising pinch. There we go. Yes, you can see 3 P's in a row, but the first P is a silent P. You don't say pseudoscorpions, you say pseudoscorpions. So yes, promising and pinch still rhyme, but that's sort of a little bit broken alliteration. And now that I see here as well, the venom of Chelophocancroides contains a rich source of novel compounds. No, the venom is the rich source. You can't ask, what is that source in the venom? No, it is the venom, is the source. But, you know, I'm a co-author on this paper. We published this a few months ago. So even with the best intentions, you can be so close to your baby that you don't see its flaws. That's a common thing. Now, I have many more things to say about the do's and don'ts of writing scientific prose, but this is long enough for today. So if you enjoyed this and it made you less bored while we were folding the laundry, for instance, excellent. Like it, subscribe, and sign up for alerts. And in the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I hope the population of viruses in your respiratory tract is depauperate. If you don't know what depauperate means, get a fucking dictionary. Ciao, see you next time.